my share, so she is ready to go ahead and start sharing. And I would
Okay.
like to introduce you all to Susan Milligan. She is our Director of Patient Experience. And Susan, just to let you know, we're going to get a better recording. The last recording, I guess, didn't turn out so well. So just so you're aware of the fact, Ashley is going to record this for those instances when you're not able to join us. Okay?
Okay, great. Great, thank you. All right, everybody. Well, hey, good afternoon. Happy Hump Day and welcome to Ensemble. My name is Susan Milligan. I oversee our patient experience, employee engagement, and leadership development for the patient access team specifically. Patient experience for everyone because, well, patient experience is everyone's responsibility. And I have with me my partner in crime today.
Hey guys, my name is Gwen Collins. I work on Susan's team and we are so excited to share this training with you. So sit back and sort of relax. We do feed off of your participation. So send us those good vibes and that great energy when we ask you questions, and you can send us answers in the chat box. So thanks for being here and welcome.
Awesome. And so here's a little fun fact for you to kick off our class today. Did you know that Ensemble is the only revenue cycle company who has a dedicated patient experience team? None of our competitors have it. And here's the reason we do. There is an urban legend out there that says that if you implement best practices for revenue cycle, like point of service collections, your patient experience scores automatically drop. And it is not true, at least not for our clients. All of our clients have either maintained or actually improved their scores since signing with us. And so patient experience is incredibly important to us. We have a very strong focus on it. And the reason we have this session for you is, how can you expect somebody to behave a certain way if you've never laid the foundation for what the expectation is with regard to patient experience? If people don't understand their role in patient experience or what it's all about, how can they meet the patient's expectations, right? And so that's what today's session is all about. So we're going to dive in by first talking about the foundation of our entire experience team, and Gwen's going to share with you our 3 E's. Go ahead, Gwen.
Thanks, Susan. So our foundation starts with empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand the feelings and emotions of other people. It's feeling with someone and putting yourself in their shoes. When you respond with empathy, you provide comfort and reassurance to that other person, whether it's a patient or a coworker. Our next foundational principle is engagement. And while empathy is the connection that you build with other people, engagement is the connection you build with the work that you do. And engagement comes from within you. We have engagement advisory groups for you leaders and for you associates out there that you can join or sponsor to heighten your experience at work. And lastly, empowerment. We want you to have the resources, authority, opportunity, and motivation to do your work while being accountable for your actions. And when you're empowered to do the right thing for our patients and each other, it will enable you to have a deeper connection with the work that you do.
Thanks, Gwen. So we're going to dive right in by talking about what patient experience is, and we have adopted the definition of patient experience from the Barrel Institute. They define it as the sum of all interactions shaped by an organization's culture that influence patient perceptions across the continuum of care. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means patient experience is everything. It literally starts the moment somebody decides to seek care, and it doesn't end until that final bill is paid in full. It is about every single interaction that they have with that healthcare organization as they're navigating through their medical journey, right? And so when you think about those interactions, it's not just the face-to-face interactions. It's about every email, every phone call, every time they use your website. If they're driving down the highway and they see a billboard with your organization's name on it, that has an impact on their patient experience as well. So think about it from a patient perspective. You call to make an appointment with us for the very first time, and you have to be fasting for that appointment. And we failed to tell you during the scheduling process that you had to fast. So you take a day off work, you come in to have this test done, and you show up and they say, have you been fasting? And the patient says, no. That does not create a really great experience. But on the other hand, if you pull up to an organization who's offering valet parking and their valet parking attendant is incredibly professional and looks great, he's tidy, he's clean, he looks professional, he acts professional, and they take your car, then you can totally understand that that would have a positive impact on our patient experience from that standpoint. So it is about every single interaction that they're having. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is it's about the culture of the organization. It's about whether or not we are speaking positively about the organization. You have to understand that you are always on stage. And here's the thing, obviously when you have a patient in front of you, you're on stage. When you're talking to a patient on the phone, you're on stage. But most people forget that even as you're walking to the parking garage, even as you're walking to the cafeteria, or you're in the bathroom talking to your friend about your day, you are on stage, because patients have the best vision and the best hearing of anyone you will ever meet in your entire life. And so you have to be aware of your words and what kind of perceptions you're giving them based on what you're saying and how you're behaving, right, as we go through. And as you're thinking about being on stage, you have to understand that you're on stage even as you're out shopping, if you're logoed up. We've actually had surveys come back for a client one time that said, I used to really love your hospital until I saw one of your associates screaming at a cashier at Walmart, and now I don't trust that they're going to treat me well when I come in, so I'm going to go to a different hospital. Anytime you're logoed, you're on stage, and you're now an ambassador for that healthcare organization. So you have to be aware of that as well. Now, if you can remember only one thing today, I want it to be this. Patient experience is not based in reality. It is based on perceptions. It's about how we made that patient feel, what they understood, and what stood out to them from those encounters with us. And that is vastly different from one patient to the next. In fact, we're going to be sharing some comments with you here in a little bit across multiple clients of ours, and you will see that they are not writing about their medical care. They're writing about how we made them feel. And then lastly, it is about the entire continuum of care. There isn't anyone who works in healthcare that does not have a hand in that patient's experience some way or another. And so we're going to talk through that today and how each of you, while they're calling in to make an appointment for their very first time, as they're on site with that appointment, or even as they're calling afterwards to finalize their bill or set up a payment plan, all of those interactions have something to do with the patient's experience. And so we have to be aware of that all the way through the continuum of care. So how do we measure it? Well, we have these surveys called the Hospital Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Systems. Whew, we just call them HCAHPS. Nobody's going to say all that. But this survey is mandated by the CMS for all hospitals in the United States. Every hospital in the US is required at minimum to survey their inpatient population. Now, most hospitals also survey their outpatient services, ambulatory surgery, and emergency department as well, but you have to survey your inpatients. And those scores are actually published. They are the only patient experience scores that are actually published, and people use them to shop for healthcare, right? Consumers use them, like you and I, to determine whether or not we want to go there for care. And as you're thinking about that, it's not just about how they rate it, it's all about their quality, their experience, and everything else. Now, has anyone out there heard of price transparency? Type in your chat box for me. Have you guys heard of price transparency in healthcare? I'm seeing a couple yeses, I'm seeing a couple no's. Okay, so let me just give you a really quick overview of what price transparency is. And January 1st of this year, CMS mandated that every hospital is required at minimum to list a list of 300 shoppable services on their website. So you could go out there and get a quote for services. So like, let's say you turn 50, and when you turn 50, the big thing you have to do is get a colonoscopy. And so you go out there to all of the hospitals in your area and you you put in your insurance information, you put in all the details they need, and they're gonna shoot back a quote for you on how much it would cost to get a colonoscopy at that hospital. Well, if you pull up 5 hospitals in your area and they're all ranging between $2,000 and like $2,300, what would be the only thing that would make you choose one hospital over the other? Their experience, right? You want to make sure that you're going to be taken care of when you're there. Now, governments actually use these surveys to determine our federal reimbursement. There are 2 questions on the survey that speak directly to an organization's financials. The first one says, rate us on a scale of 1 to 10. We always want it to be a 9 or 10 to be helpful for us. And the other The other question says, would you recommend us to your family and friends? And if they say no, they wouldn't recommend us, our reimbursements automatically drop. And when I'm talking about reimbursements, guys, I'm not talking about thousands of dollars. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars based on the size of the organization. So we cannot let that money go, right? We have to make sure that we get every dollar we possibly can, because without that money, we can't expand. We can't bring in more beds to an emergency department. We can't go under construction. We can't get better equipment. We can't sign on for better software, right? All of those things. So we want to make sure we're getting every dollar that's due. Now, these surveys rate us on a scale of very good to very poor, and you can see little smiley faces at the bottom of your screen or the frowny face. And it is not uncommon for us to see a survey come back for an emergency department that says something like, I could feel God's presence today in the hands of everyone who cared for me. I've never felt more cared about or cared for in my entire life, and I would recommend you to everybody I know, right? But then 2 hours later, same ED, same exact staff, we'll get a survey back that says, very poor across the board, and the comment will say something like, I would rather die than walk back into your hospital. What happened? God was just here 2 hours ago. How is that possible? Our biggest challenge in patient experience is that we deliver an inconsistent one. We let outliers determine whether or not we're going to give that patient the service they deserve, right? How many times have we seen them this week? Were they rude to us? Did we have a fight with our boss or our spouse before we came in? Are we just in a cranky mood because we didn't have enough sleep? And we can't do that. We have to build a culture of always, not a culture of sometimes. And here's the thing. It's not enough for you as an individual to deliver an exceptional experience every single time. You have to ensure that your peers are doing the same thing too. And in order to do that, we have to build a culture of feedback, right? Because you have to be able to give feedback to your peers, and you have to be able to give and receive that feedback if we're going to be successful as a team as we go through. Now, as I mentioned, all of these inpatient HCAHPS surveys are actually published. So we're going to go out there and take a look at some of these questions. And I know you're thinking, why do we care about inpatient HCAHPS? We usually deal with EDs, outpatient, and ambulatory surgery. But here's the thing. The way we treat our inpatients when they're virtually held hostage by us is a direct indicator of how we're going to treat everybody else. So if they decide, if they're trying to decide where to come, whether or not to come to our ED, they're going to check these scores to see how we treat our inpatients to determine whether or not we're worth coming to, right? So here's your next question in your chat box. Type in the zip code of where you are. First zip code in wins. We're going to pull up some hospitals in your area. All right, looks like we got Madison. Madison was a quick draw, 85137. Oh, okay, we're in Arizona. All right, let's take a look. All right, Madison, did you know that there were 9 hospitals within a 50-mile radius of that zip code, or is that a surprise to you? No surprise, okay. Awesome. So this pulls up, you can change your distance, obviously, but when this pulls up, it's going to give you a couple of things of information. It's going to tell you their overall star rating, and this rating is really based on how well a hospital performs with areas of quality, like treating heart attacks, readmission rates, safety of care, things like that. The other score that you're going to see is a patient survey rating, and this is their inpatient HCAHPS score. This is going to tell you how we treated people with regard to things like communication, responsiveness of staff, cleanliness and quietness of the hospital environment, and things like that. So let's go ahead and pick 2 hospitals, Gwen. Let's go ahead and grab, I don't know if it's called Cobra Valley, but that's what I'm going to call it for this. See if we can find another one who might be scoring a little bit lower. If not, oh, they look like they're all about the same. Oh, grab Banner. Go ahead and grab Banner for me. Oh, get Mountain. Yeah, sorry. I get so excited when I see data. Yeah. Perfect. Now, this site is going to allow you to compare these side by side. And so you can see the distance between the zip code. You can see their overall star rating side by side and their patient survey rating. Now, when you dive into the questions, it's going to give you some really great detail. It's going to give you all of the questions that are asked on the survey. And it's really important that you understand the kind of questions that they're asking, because again, they're not really asking about the medical care. They're asking about the treatment, right? How we treated them. So I'm just going to call out one of my favorite questions to help get you guys to wrap your head around patient experience and what the questions actually mean. Patients who reported that they always received help as soon as they wanted. Mountain Vista Medical Center delivered on that 55% of the time. So what does that mean? That means 45% of the time they had inpatients in their hospital, okay? And that inpatient pushed their call light and nobody came in a time frame that they felt was reasonable. It doesn't mean we didn't come. It just means that patient experience is based on perceptions, right? And so how quickly I expect a response and how quickly you expect a response could be two entirely different things. And so when you're looking at this, okay, think about that for a second. What do you think the national average response time is when somebody pushes their call light? How many minutes do you think it typically takes for somebody to respond once you push a call light? Go ahead and type that in your chat box. How many minutes do you think? Take a guess. I'm seeing 2, 7, 5, 7, 8, 5, 3, 2. You people who say 2, you're optimists, right? So the national average is 3 to 4 minutes. Now there are some hospitals out there that do respond as quickly as 2 minutes. So you guys you're not wrong. We just don't have as many of those, right? But the average is 3 to 4 minutes. But there also are some hospitals out there that take upwards of 17 minutes to respond to a call light. 17 minutes, guys. Can you imagine? Put that in perspective by thinking about this. What do you think the reasons are that people typically push their call light? I mean, people push their call light for a variety of reasons, but there are 3 main reasons they typically push their call light. What do you think they are? So I'm seeing an emergency, bathroom, pain. They need help. They're in pain. Yeah. So there are 3 main reasons people typically push their call light. The first one is, gosh, I hope it's not I can't breathe, Courtney, because if it isn't, it takes them 17 minutes. That patient is doomed. But there are 3 main reasons that people typically push their call light. The first one is pain, right? And when somebody's in pain, what sometimes happens in healthcare is they push their call light, and we immediately look at that patient's chart to see when they can get their pain meds, right? And if it takes longer, if it's going to be 30 minutes to an hour or something like that, we kind of hesitate to go in and even address that because we know that all they want is their pain meds. And so we kind of ignore it and we delay in going in to have that conversation with them because it's an awkward conversation that nobody wants to have. But here's the thing. If you ignore pain, it just makes pain worse because pain will actually increase out of fear and out of loneliness, right? And so I love that one of you put, they were alone. Lori, they're alone and they don't like that. They need somebody. If they're in pain and they're alone, the pain actually can increase. And so there are plenty of things that we can do, even if they can't have their pain meds, to help them over the hump until they can. And ignoring them is not one of them, right? We should be going in there. We should be trying pet therapy, right? Or massage therapy or music therapy. Many hospitals have those available to them. We could take them a warm compress or a blanket or a cold compress for that matter. We could reposition them in the bed to make them feel more comfortable. We could go in and just have a conversation with them so they didn't feel quite so alone, and we could distract them until they can have their medication or put the TV on or put on some music as we're going through. But leaving them alone in those situations isn't the best way to handle that patient's experience, right? Because if you want to know what it feels like when you're in pain and you push your call light and you're waiting, drop to the floor today and do a plank. Set your timer for 4 minutes, right? The national average, or 3.5 minutes, right? Because it's 3 to 4 minutes. Set your timer for 3.5 minutes. Get down on the floor and do a plank. Because I guarantee you that after about a minute, you start shaking, right? And those last 2.5 minutes are going to feel like a lifetime. Multiply that by 1,000,000. That's how people feel when they're in pain and they're waiting for us to answer their call light, right? So we have to make sure that we're responsive to them and we're not leaving them hanging. Now, the second reason that a lot of people push their call light, and many of you said it in the chat box, is that they have to go to the bathroom, right? We actually acclimate people to our unit, and we set an expectation when we're welcoming them to our unit. We say, hey, you've been labeled as a fall risk. Do not get out of bed. If you have to go to the bathroom, push this call button. We're going to come in here and help you. So my next question for your chat box is, do you get up and go to the bathroom immediately every single time you have to go to the bathroom, or do you hold it? What do you think? Type that in your chat box. Are you one of these people who jumps up and goes every single time? Or do you hold it? Yeah, I'm seeing a ton of people coming across as holding it, right? Most of us don't want to be that person on the car trip that says, oh, pull over at that next gas station. We're just going to wait as long as you possibly can. And our patients are the same way. They want to wait as long as you possibly can. So if they're in a hospital that responds in 2 minutes, or even in the national average of 3 to 4, holding it and pushing the call light isn't a big deal. But if you're in a hospital that requires, that takes 17 minutes to respond, you start getting really uncomfortable. And in your head, you start thinking, maybe I won't fall if I get up and go to the bathroom, right? Or maybe you can't hold it anymore and you have an accident, which leads me to reason number 3 that people typically push their call light. Maybe they couldn't hold it anymore. Maybe they had an accident in their bed. Maybe their bandage came loose or their IV came out and they have blood on them. Maybe they spilled coffee on themselves and now they're not capable of doing the things for themselves, like cleaning themselves up, that they could typically do. And so they're reliant on one of us to come in and help them through that. And the longer we make them wait, the longer we make them wait, the longer we impact human dignity. And when human dignity is impacted, that is burned into your memory. And when the survey comes back, that's the only thing they're going to remember. And that's what they're going to write about. And so we want to make sure that we change our behaviors to change their experience. So if I was working with Mountain Vista Medical Center, the very first thing I would want to know is their data, right? How quickly are you responding? Are you responding within the national average, or is it taking longer? And if they were responding within the national average, I would want to do some interventions. Gwen, do you want to tell them what an intervention is?
Absolutely. An intervention is simply an action plan to change the patient's perception of care.
Thank you, Gwen. So these interventions are our intention to improve their experience across the board, right? And so there are many things we could do on a unit that was scoring like that. The very first thing I would say is make this unit a no-pass zone. And that means that it doesn't matter who you are. If you're on this unit and you see that somebody's pushed their call light, you pop your head in, whether you're the CFO of this organization or you're a food services rep or an EDS person or a nurse or somebody from registration who happens to be up there getting some documents signed or whatever, you pop your head in and you say, hey, I see you pushed your call light. Is there something I can do for you? Because there are plenty of things we can do that do not require a nurse. And patient experience is everyone's responsibility, not just the clinical staff, right? And so we have to make sure that we're doing our part. Now, the second thing I would say is that you have to round on your patients. And man, people hate me when I say round on your patients, but the reality is this: if you proactively round on your patients, you are doing it at your time instead of at their time, right? And that means you'll have less time to react to their challenges later because you've already met all of their needs proactively. So if you go into a patient's room at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, at 11:45, if they even need something, they're less likely to even push their call light because they know they're going to see you in about 15 minutes. But if they do push their call light, they're more likely to act with grace if there's a delay in answering it because they know that you've already built that connection with them. They know they can trust you, and they know that you're going to be coming in as soon as you possibly can. So they will rate us differently on the survey. So we can change our behaviors to change their perceptions. So we can go back to the presentation. Thanks, Gwen. So I don't know how familiar you are with patient experience scores, but here's how it works. We are actually looking at, like in an emergency department, you'll have a total score for the entire department, and then you'll have a section. They actually rate 4 different sections in an emergency department. They rate the nurses, the physicians, the arrival, and then the overall assessment. And then underneath those sections, they have anywhere from 2 to 8 questions that roll up to make that section score. So you have a score for each question. Those average out to make the section score, and the section scores average out to make the department average. So when I'm looking at patient experience data, the first thing I want to know is what's the average of the department. And then I look to see what section is scoring higher than that average. Why would I care about who's scoring higher than the average instead of immediately pouncing on the section that isn't scoring as high? Why do I look at who's scoring higher first instead of lower? What do you think? Put that in your chat box for me. Why would that be important to us, to know what section is scoring the highest? Any guesses? You can learn from them what they're doing right. Thank you, Kayleen. Yeah, exactly, guys. That's exactly right. The first thing I want to do is make sure that that team knows that I noticed it and to celebrate them for a moment. I want to thank them for performing and let them know that whatever it is they're doing is working. Because if somebody doesn't tell you that what you're doing is working, you're less likely to keep doing it, right? So I want them to know, hey, keep it up. Whatever you're doing is working. And then I want to know specifically what it is they are doing. Because once I know what they're doing, then I can share that with the other sections, right, with the other departments, and say, hey, under arrival, they're using this language, they're doing this kind of rounding, they're saying this certain thing, they're providing blankets, whatever it is, and I can spread it to the sections that are scoring lowest, and then we should see a bump in the scores across the board. Now, these surveys typically look at a couple of different things. They're asking about the patient's experience, and that actually goes all the way down to the environment. There are questions on the survey that say, tell me about the comfort of the waiting area, okay? They're asking about the patient's participation in their care and how we participated in their care. Were we providing positive handoffs? Were we working collectively to care for them? But mostly these surveys are trying to assess their emotional comfort. Did we make them feel cared about and cared for? And did we make them feel safe? Because if we did, then our scores will fall into line every single time, okay? Now, the patient experience data is incredibly important, but my favorite part are the comments, because the comments tell the real story. The numbers are important, but the comments are your reputation out there in the community. And the comments are actually what they called their best friend to tell them about as they were leaving the hospital. And so these are great stories that we can learn from, and we can implement interventions based on what we're hearing here. Now, here are some comments from across multiple organizations. And again, you're going to notice they're not writing about their medical care. They're writing about how we made them feel during these encounters. Go ahead, Gwen.
Treatment for an out-of-town resident was the worst experience of financial and racial discrimination I have ever encountered.
The receptionist was extremely nasty and rude. She kept rolling her eyes at me as if she couldn't be bothered.
I think they need to ask the patient if someone is going to take them home. I was there by myself and I did not feel okay to drive home.
Now, this one is my personal favorite because it speaks to just how simple patient experience can be. My husband was with me and it was late, 11:30 p.m. He worked a full 14-hour shift and he was tired. They let him lay on the bed with me and offered him water and blankets. Water and blankets, guys. We didn't give him a steak dinner, okay? We gave him water and blankets. We do that for our pets, right? And when we sent this woman a survey and said, please tell us what your experience with us was like, what stood out to her, what meant something to her, was how we treated her husband. The reality is this: people come to the hospital with two sets of people, right? They either brought somebody with them because they themselves are the caregiver, like a parent has to bring a child, or they might be bringing an elderly adult with them because they can't leave them at home, and so they themselves are providing care for another person. Or they're bringing somebody with them because they, as the patient, need that support from them. Like you might bring a friend or a spouse with you because you want somebody there to support you. And it doesn't matter what the reason is that those people are with that patient. If we don't take the stress off of that person having to be here with them, off of the patient, then they're not going to have a great experience. So anything we can do for the people that are accompanying them is something that will stand out and that will make them remember and feel that we wanted to take care of the entire family unit, not just the patient. And that's what we're looking for.
All the staff responded quickly and were very compassionate. They took time with me, so I never felt rushed or like a number to them. They treated me very well.
The registration lady explained everything clearly and easily so I can understand. As you can see, we are very good, or we miss the mark sometimes. So our goal is to get to be exceptional every single time and to build that culture of always. So what is your role in patient experience? It is surprisingly simple. Don't be a jerk, right? I mean, think about it. Treat every single person every single time the way you would want to be treated, or better yet, treat them the way you want your best friends and family to be treated every single time. At the start of your shift, at the end of your shift, on a Sunday, on a Wednesday, on a holiday you didn't even want to work, every single time. And make sure your peers are doing it as well. I want you to think about peak experiences for a second. Think about Disney, right? When people go to Disney, it is really expensive. The lines are crazy long and it's super hot. In fact, you spend more time waiting in line than you do riding any ride at Disney. And just when that parent is saying to themselves, I am never going to Disney again, Mickey Mouse comes up and hugs their kid, and the smile that spreads across that kid's face melts that parent's heart, and in their head, they're planning their next trip to Disney. That's why Disney is the most magical place on earth. They lock you in with the feels, right? They make you feel something. And you remember that. And so you want to have that feeling again. And so that's why they keep going back there. And we can do the very same thing in healthcare. All we have to do is listen. And I mean, actively listen, guys. Not listen to respond, but listen to understand, because patients will tell us a lot during their experiences that we can pick up from their body language, from their language, from their tone, from their words, all of it. And so we want to make sure that we're always paying attention during these encounters. The next part of your role is understanding that you have to demonstrate common courtesy and practice common sense. And I hate that I even have to have that on there, but the reality is this. We get so caught up in the task that we tell ourselves stories about things we can and cannot do for patients. I can't spend time with them because I have to get to this next patient. If I spend more time with them, this patient's going to be angry. I'm going to tell you right now, the time isn't a problem as much as the efficiency is, and the fact that you're giving the same attention to everyone. You're going to have patients who require a little bit more time and patients who require a little less time. It will all average out by the end of the day. Now, Gwen has the most amazing story for you that happened at one of our clients in the summer of 2020, so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, where there was not common courtesy or common sense in play. And we'd love to hear in the chat box as she's telling this story what your thoughts are. I want to see when you start to get angry about the story she's telling you. Go ahead, Gwen.
Thanks, Susan. Susan and I have the amazing opportunity to travel around and deliver this training in person on various occasions. And as Susan mentioned, we were at a client site delivering this training, and it was the heat of summer. It was in the deep south, heat of summer, super hot. And of course, 2020 brought about with it COVID-19. So we are all living through and have lived through the COVID-19 crisis. And, you know, there are certain things that have been put into place to keep us all safe and protected from the spread of the virus. You know, mask mandate, visitation restrictions at facilities, screeners posted at the doors, taking temperatures and things like that. And while we were at this training, an associate came up to us after the training was finished, and she said, you know, I saw something this week that really caused me to pause, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. And so what had happened, what she had relayed to us that had happened, was a mom came to the facility with her 2 children, and one of whom had an appointment that day. And before she even got to the screener's desk, the screener stopped her and said, no, ma'am, I'm so sorry. We cannot let you back with both of your children. We only allow 1 person per patient. And so let's just stop there for a minute. Let's think about what it may have cost for this mom to bring her child to that appointment. She obviously did not have childcare because she had 2 children with her. She may have had to take time off work. She maybe missed out on wages to get her child to this appointment. And something else that was interesting to note, this particular client, pediatric appointments were booked very far out in advance, several weeks in advance. So she may have been waiting many, many days, even weeks, to get her child into this appointment. And so she could have been feeling anxiety to bring her child here. And of course, you know, not knowing her situation, we don't know what she was facing. But the screener gave her 2 options. The screener told her, you can reschedule your appointment, or you can take your other child out to the car, the hot car, and leave them there while you bring your other child in and accompany them to the appointment. Yes. Oh, the chats are coming in, Susan. Yes.
See that? I like that they're enraged, because that's what they should be.
That's exactly it. So we want that from you guys. We want you to be empowered to ask the tough questions. And if you had seen that happening What would you have done? Share that with us in the chat box. Yes, we have a lot of people who are furious about that situation. Absolutely.
So we want to know, would you have stepped in? What, right? Would common sense kick in? Yes, thank you, Amanda. Maybe a volunteer could sit with the child. Oh my gosh, Ashley, that happened to you? That's terrible. Oh my gosh. Yeah, you could offer to watch the child. A lot of people don't do that, but there are things in place, right? All of these rules are put in place for a reason, but there is an exception to almost every rule. This is not a HIPAA violation, right? This is something we put in place to keep patients safe. And so common courtesy and common sense did not prevail in this situation, right? And so we want associates at Ensemble who are going to step in when they hear somebody saying something that just does not make sense. When you get that gut feeling like, ooh, I don't think that's right, we want the kind of people who are going to step in and say something. Do it respectfully and do it professionally, obviously, but don't let it go on, right? That's what we're looking for. Now, the next part of your role in understanding in patient experience is understanding the difference between empathy and sympathy. And before we watch this amazing video by Brene Brown, I have a couple questions for you. As people are engaging in healthcare, as they're coming in for an annual physical, or they're walking into the ED, or they're calling to make an appointment because they were at their doctor's and their doctor said, ooh, something's not right, you need to go in for this test. As they're engaging in healthcare, how do you think they're feeling emotionally as they're making that phone call or walking in for the very first time? How do you think they're feeling emotionally? Scared, absolutely. Anxiety, nervous, anxious, no doubt. You know, they're in the most vulnerable time of their life as they're engaging in healthcare. I have found that they are typically worried about three things. They're typically worried about how much it's going to cost, right? Because nobody understands their insurance. Nobody understands it. And I'll tell you, nothing will kill a patient experience faster than getting a bill 2 weeks after you've been seen and not knowing it was coming. Patients hate it. They want to know before they leave how they can get a discount, how they can connect to financial aid, whether or not they can set up a payment plan, all of those things. And they can't do that if we do not inform them of what their financial liability is. And so we have to make sure we do that. The second thing they worry about is, how long is this going to take? Because it doesn't matter who you are. There's only 24 hours in a day. Nobody gets any more than that, and nobody gets any less. And I have yet to meet the patient who has said, oh, Susan, I can hang out here with you all day today. I have nothing better to do. That doesn't happen, right? People have jobs, they have kids, they have pets, they have all these other things they'd rather be doing than hanging out in our EDs. And we do a terrible job of keeping them informed. We do a terrible job in outpatient. We do a terrible job in ambulatory surgery. You know, we tell people to fast, right? And we say, don't come, you know, come in for this appointment, make sure you haven't eaten, you know, after midnight. Your appointment's at 7 o'clock, and then the appointment gets pushed back, or the surgery gets pushed back, and they haven't eaten. I don't know about you, but when I'm hungry, I get a little hangry, like those Snicker commercials, and our patients do too. And so by not keeping them informed, it just escalates situations that don't need to be escalated, right? All we have to do is engage with them. If somebody's in the ED for a long time, even though we can never tell them how long it's going to be, what we can do is not ignore them. What we can do is walk up to them and say, hey, I just want to let you know we haven't forgotten about you. Is there anything I can get you to make you feel more comfortable right now? And then follow through and make it happen, right? So they don't feel like they're out there on an island. And then the third thing that they worry about is, what are we going to tell them? Because very few people seek healthcare, especially now in COVID times. When they initially feel sick. Nobody wants to go to the hospital now. They're afraid they're going to get COVID when they go. And so they wait till the last possible minute, and they're terrified about what news we're going to give them. Is a diagnosis that they thought they were over with coming back? Did they wait too long? Did they cause really serious damage, right? Do they have to wake somebody up in the middle of the night to come and get them or to take them? What are they going to do about work? What are they going to do about their kids? They have all these fears going through their head. And when they finally get to us, they want empathy. They don't want sympathy. What else do you think they want from us when they finally come on site? Type that in your chat box. What else are they looking for besides empathy? Respect. Yes, Jada, thank you. Compassion, help, reassurance. Absolutely. Information, trust. Yes. Understanding, appreciation. Absolutely. You guys are 100% on point. You know, guys, they're looking for confidence from the person who's treating them. That's a great one, Cindy. They're looking for AIDIT, and Gwen's going to type that in your chat box for you. This is a Studer Group tool. The A stands for acknowledge. They want to be acknowledged as soon as they walk in the door. That means put down your phone, stop talking to your friend, look away from the computer, pay attention to me. I'm the most important person in your world right now. That's what they want, and they deserve it, right? They want to be introduced, okay? They want to know your name, and, out of pure respect, okay? You know intimate details of their life, okay? You know the last 4 of their social, you know their date of birth, so you know their real age, right? You know why they're being seen today, and that's information that their best friend and family might not even have yet, and you know it. So out of pure respect, they should know your name. But if respect isn't good enough, there is a question on the survey that says, is there anybody you'd like to recognize for providing outstanding service today? And if you don't give your name, we can't begin to recognize you. If you don't give your name, then they try to label people so we can track you down and tell you you did a great job. And they'll say things like, well, that chunky redheaded girl was super helpful. Well, none of us want to be the chunky redheaded girl, and none of us want to know which one of us is the chunky redheaded girl. And so if you give your name, we can avoid all of that right from the very beginning. They also want to know the duration, right? We touched on that earlier. They want to know how long things are going to take. We have to do a better job of keeping them informed. They want an explanation for why they're having the test done that they're having done. They want to know why we're having them sign the papers we're having them sign, why they have to sit here and wait even longer, why somebody's being taken in front of them. All of those things we have to be able to explain professionally, right? Why are we asking somebody about black lung during the registration process? They don't understand that, right? We have to be able to tell them. And then finally, they want to be thanked for choosing us, because again, healthcare is a competition. It's a business. They don't have to come to your hospital. They have other choices of where they can go. And we have to make sure that they keep coming back to us. And it doesn't have to be a cheesy, thank you for coming in today, right? But it has to be something that closes the gap on that conversation so they know that you saw them as a person and not as a number. So if they came into the ED and they got hurt on the basketball court, your closing could be, hey, we're going to have you out there doing jump shots again is in no time. Have a great rest of your day. And if if you need anything else, don't hesitate to give us a call back, right? Or come back in. Or if they came in for an outpatient clinic appointment and they've been fasting, you know that they're starving. And so your closing could be, hey, if you're anything like me, you're in desperate need of coffee and something to eat. When you're done with your test, we have the most amazing cafeteria. They have the best sausage, egg, and cheese muffins you've ever had in your entire life. Grab one on your way out the door. You're going to have the best day ever, right? Anything that connects with them and builds that personal connection is what we're looking for. So as promised, I have a video I want you to watch. It's from my all-time favorite speaker, well, one of them, Brene Brown. And she's going to talk you through the difference between empathy and sympathy and why empathy is one of our foundational E's.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
And connection is exactly what patient experience is about. If you can build that connection with that patient and their family, that's what they're going to feel, that's what they're going to remember, and that's what they're going to write about. And so your last part of your role in patient experience is understanding service recovery and using it to your advantage and using it proactively. Okay, now most people use service recovery to recover service, just like it says, but I'm telling you, if you use it proactively, you'll have less service to recover in the first place. Now, our definition of service recovery is going to be up here on the screen here in a second, but I really want you to remember it like this. It's two parts. The first part is putting out the fire right in front of you, right? It's talking that patient down off the ledge, solving their problem in the moment, identifying that issue, and handling it right there in that moment. And we do a great job at part one. And we do such a great job because, well, we do it every single day, right? So we're really well versed at it. But part two of service recovery is actually going back and figuring out what caused that problem and putting that fire out once and for all and making sure it doesn't burn anybody else, that patient or any other future patient. And we do a terrible job at part two. And the reason we do such a terrible job at part two is that we think it's somebody else's job, right? We think that if we reported it, we've done our job. We can just wash our hands of it, right? Hey, I told them that was broken, or hey, I told them they said they were unhappy with that, and so we're off the hook now. Now it's somebody else's problem. But I'm telling you, if you really want to improve patient experience, you really want to improve your work environment, you really want to love your job, then you own these situations all the way to the end. You don't just report them, you follow up, you offer to lead initiatives, and you take control of the situation to improve your experience and our patients. Gwen has one of the most amazing service recovery stories I have ever heard in my entire career. It's a little bit funny, so she's going to share with you. Go ahead, Gwen.
Thanks, Susan. All right, guys, sometimes I get the giggles with this, so bear with me. Let me give you a little flavor. One of the first things, when I heard this story, one of the first things I loved about it was a peer, a coworker of the person who performed this act of service recovery shared the incident with us. And so I really love that about this story. And these guys are located in a freestanding outpatient facility. They're not connected to the hospital. So they don't have environmental services on site during the day. EVS comes at night to tidy up and take care of all the house cleaning stuff that needs to go on. And at this freestanding facility, they serve a primarily elderly patient population. And their patients have difficulty with mobility and getting around, that kind of thing. And again, in this outpatient facility, they have a couple of sets of bathrooms. There's one set of bathrooms that is kind of up front. It's up front where all the action takes place. Patients come in and out there. Registration is nearby. And there's just a lot of stuff going on up there in those front set of bathrooms. The back set of bathrooms are inconvenient and difficult to get to. Again, their patients have mobility issues. And so it's hard for them to get to the back set of bathrooms. And so on this fateful day, the day that we refer to now as dun, 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 the incident, a poop explosion happened in the front bathroom. And from the way it was described to us is that it was everywhere. Like in places not humanly possible, on the walls, on the ceiling, just everywhere. And the staff, they were beside themselves. They did not know what they were going to do now that this incident had occurred. And they were faced with a couple of choices, not really great choices either. They were thinking they were going to have to close down these bathrooms, which would have been a terrible inconvenience to everyone involved, to the patients, to the staff. And come on, guys, it was a poop explosion. You know, there was a smell. There was a terrible smell coming from that area. So to close the bathrooms down would have just been bad. And so they were kind of discussing their options. And the beautiful thing about this story is there was one person who just, who stepped up without being asked, without being told. She stepped in, and I have kind of this silly mental image of her putting on a gown and a mask and snapping on those long yellow cleaning gloves, you know, the ones that I mean, right? Snap, snap, and bending down and scooping up her little basket of cleaning supplies. And she went in there, and yeah, she is the real MVP, Courtney. You got that right. She went in there and took one for the team. She cleaned the bathroom. And what an amazing and humbling act of service recovery part one, right? Putting out the fire, the explosion that had happened in front of her. And now I'm going to turn it over to Susan to tell you about number 2.
She always does that to me. She tries to make me laugh every time we facilitate together by calling it the number 2s. So yeah, I'm not saying you have to clean toilets to be exceptional, okay? In my entire career, this is the first time I've ever heard a story like that. But I will tell you this, if you want to get my attention via email, title your email Poop Explosion. I am likely to read it first and read it quickly, right? Because I'm curious. I want to know what's going on as we go through. Well, when things like this happen, I always like to talk to the person, right? Send them something, email them, you know, meet them if I can. And this facility was about an hour from my house. So I said, you know what? This warrants a visit. So I put together a little sweet and salty basket for them. And of course I bought her a poop emoji keychain because you could resist, right? And I drove up there to meet this young lady and was talking to her about what happened and why she did it. And she kept saying, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And I finally asked her, I said, okay, so if this happens again, are you now the designated toilet cleaner? And she goes, what? And I said, well, you know, you did it once. Like, what are you going to do going forward? And she said, oh gosh, no. I reached out to EVS and I explained what happened and I asked if we could establish some sort of a hotline. So in the event that this ever happens again, we call this number, they're going to dispatch somebody from the main hospital to come up and clean it up. And then I sent that information out to everybody on the team so they know, don't call me if another poop explosion happens, call this number to take care of it. We'll see that part 2 of service recovery, right? She saw it through all the way to the end. Notice she didn't say to her boss, fix it and do something about this because I'm never doing this again. She didn't complain about it. She just took care of it herself. And that's empowerment, right? That's the kind of empowerment we want all of our team members to have. Solve the problem and stay with it all the way through to the end, right? We want you to always feel empowered. Now, there are 4 A's to service recovery we want you to remember. The first one is about anticipating their needs. I'm going to let Gwen talk to you about that one.
Yep, absolutely. So the first A is anticipate. Guys, have you ever been at a job where you've been short-staffed? That never happens, right? Well, the first part of anticipating needs is to show up, because if you're not there, how can you anticipate the needs of your team and your patient? And when people call out from work, it puts stress on coworkers and patients. It can even cause patients to think that they might not be getting the quality of care that they deserve. So come to work. Be known for your dependability. Be that person who, should you have to call out, the rest of the team knows that it must be a major event for you to miss work. The next part of anticipating the needs is to watch and listen for unspoken needs. Now, if you're patient-facing, you have a home field advantage, right? You can see and hear the patient, and that's invaluable for determining their needs. However, if you're a phone-based associate, It can be a little bit more challenging, but it's not impossible. You really just have to tune in and listen to what your caller is saying and the tone of voice that they're using to determine what they may need or want. And so think about a parent calling in to schedule a child's appointment and how anxious they may be. And if that appointment is several weeks out in advance, that parent may be feeling more anxiety because it's a longer wait than they anticipated. So if you're on the phone for them and you hear that hesitation, key into that and see what else you can offer. Maybe you can offer another site if you work for a health system that has multiple sites. Make sure that you're listening and watching for things that are said and unsaid. And last, to anticipate needs, give them what they want before they know they need it. Get to know your place of work. If you work at a facility, then you should be well versed in the amenities of that facility. Is wayfinding an issue? Hospitals are a maze of hallways that all look the same. And if that's the case where you work, have a map ready. Or better yet, escort the patient to their appointment. Either do it yourself if you can, or enlist the help of a volunteer. Don't leave your patients sitting in the waiting room with no distractions. Give them the Wi-Fi password so they can use their devices while they wait. Or direct them to a healing garden or a cafe or a gift shop if they know they're going to be at the facility for a while. Give them what they want before they even know to ask.
Thanks, Gwen. Now the second A is acknowledge, and this is really two parts. The first part of acknowledge is I need you to acknowledge when something's gone wrong, right? Which means I need you to be brave. I need you to walk into that lion's den when that patient is screaming or crying or stomping or huffing and puffing and pacing. I need you to be the one who walks up to them and says, hey, I can see something's going on. How can I help? Because if you don't walk into that lion's den and engage with that patient, not only is their experience ruined, but the experience of everyone in the room is ruined as well. Because if they can hear that patient and they can see that patient and they know that they're upset and they can hear that they're upset, then you can too. And if you don't care about them, you won't care about me. But on the flip side of that, if you do engage with that patient and you walk up to them and you say, hey, I can see something's going on. How can I help you? You build trust with that patient, and you now have trust built with everybody in the room who can see you and hear you. And so it's critically important that we acknowledge when something has gone wrong. Now, the second part of acknowledge is even harder than that. The second part of acknowledge is you have to understand that in healthcare, sometimes people get jaded. Sometimes people have lost their love of healthcare and they act with sympathy instead of empathy. They actually start to judge people based on how many times they've been seen or why they're being seen, or whether or not they think they're overreacting or underreacting, or whether or not they're using the ED as a PPC, right? We start to make these judgments against people, and those judgments cloud our ability to give them an exceptional experience. You know, Gwen mentioned that we have the amazing ability to travel across the United States and see into the lives of numerous healthcare systems. And I'll tell you the one trend that disturbs me the most that I have seen, no matter what hospital I have been at across the United States, whether in Idaho or in New Jersey or in Tennessee or in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, it doesn't matter what state I've been in, I always overhear staff members talking about patients in a negative way. And that is a giant no-no. I hear patients being referred to as frequent flyers, or I've heard people refer to patients as that fat woman over in the corner, right? And, you know, probably the worst story I have about overhearing people talking about a patient had to do with a presumed drug seeker. And I was shadowing in an ED one day, and a nurse walked out of the room that a patient was in, and she walked up to her friend and she said, "Did you see the patient in room 2? Drug seeker. I am so tired of these druggies coming into our hospital thinking we're going to give them narcotics." You know, I asked her on a scale of 1 to 10 what her pain was, and she said it was a 10. Yeah, right, a 10. She's not screaming. She's not crying. She's sitting in there rocking back and forth like an idiot. I told the doctor to take his time, because we're not going to give her drugs anyway. And if we make her wait long enough, she'll just get up and leave, and we can get real patients in here. I couldn't even believe what I heard. Who talks about another human being that way, right? Well, see, we have this old saying in patient experience that says, if you can see it, if you can hear it, or God forbid you can smell it, you now own it. And so since I heard that conversation, I had to address it. Because if I didn't, I'd be just as guilty as they were, right? So I walked up to these nurses and I introduced myself, and I wanted to let them know that I overheard their entire conversation. But I told them, I said, you know, that's not why I came over though. If I heard your conversation, other patients heard it, and that's a giant problem that we can talk about later. But I really wanted to share with you that I had just read the most amazing research studies on adults who had been abused as children. And did you know that when people abuse children, they do it, one of the reasons they do it is because they love to hear the kids scream and cry out in pain every time they hurt them. And so the more they hit them, the more they scream and cry out in pain. And did you know that children, because they are amazingly resilient and incredibly intelligent, can actually condition themselves to never cry out in pain again, no matter how much pain is inflicted on them. And that can actually carry into adulthood. Could it be that that patient in room 2 is a victim of abuse? Could it be that that patient in room 2 has special needs, like maybe autism, and they're rocking back and forth because that's how they soothe themselves? Could it be that their pain scale is different than yours? Could it be that they have a really high tolerance for pain and they're just not one who screams out like that? Could it be that our job is to care for them, not judge them? Now go get the doctor. See, judgment is real, guys, and it can happen to anybody. And every first impression is an incomplete impression. We have no right to determine or to withhold the kind of care that patients need because we're making assumptions about their life, right? I have a most amazing video for you to watch. Grab a tissue though, because I tell you, it always makes me tear up. It is a great reminder of all the things that go on behind the scenes that you should be aware of. And honestly, if you just lead with empathy every single time, you'll be okay. every first impression is an incomplete impression. And we make snap judgments on people, and those judgments can have a lasting impact on our patients. Let me tell you a story about something that happened to me. So my husband and I got married in 2004. And when we got married, we decided right away we wanted to have a family. We tried and tried and tried to get pregnant, and we could not for the life of us. And so we had to seek fertility to have our son Colin, and he was born in 2007. And when we had him, they said, enjoy him. He's going to be all you have, you know, and we were like, okay, that's great. Well, imagine how surprised we were in 2010 to find out we were pregnant again after they said it couldn't happen. We were over the moon excited, and we started calling this little nugget our bonus baby. And that's how we referred to him the entire pregnancy. And the entire pregnancy went incredibly well until 5 weeks before my due date. 5 weeks before my due date, I started having complications, and they put me in the hospital on bed rest. And I know you guys don't know me, but Gwen does, and putting me on bed rest was excruciating, okay? I am not one to sit around and do nothing. So it was awful. And they said, okay, we're gonna try to keep him in there as long as we possibly can. Well, as long as they possibly could, ended up being a week. And so 4 weeks before my due date, they delivered our second son, Danny, via C-section. And I still remember that morning he was born. I remember they held him up, and I looked at him, and I was like, 10 fingers, 10 toes, he has my chin, he's cute, let's do this. And then the whispering started, and they took our bonus baby away. And it turns out that our bonus baby had a bonus diagnosis of Down syndrome, something that none of us were expecting to hear, something that none of us were prepared to hear, and that information left us reeling. Well, when you give birth to a special needs kid, the first months of their life are critical, right, to their development. You have to have them tested for everything. They have to go to the hospital and see any number of specialists. Danny had to go see cardiology and pulmonology and ophthalmology and genetics, and the list goes on and on and on. So the first 6 weeks of his life, we were back and forth to the hospital, to the children's hospital, numerous times, seeking care for him. And about 6 months in, 6 weeks in, we were home, and it was a Saturday, and he didn't look well. He was really, really pale, and his breathing was really shallow. And I told my husband, I was like, something seems off today. I think we need to take him to the ED. He just doesn't look himself. And we had insurance at the time that mandated that before you could go to the ED or urgent care, you had to call the nurse helpline, and the nurse would tell you which one to go to. And if you didn't call the line, it wasn't covered. Well, healthcare is expensive, right? So you call the line. So I called the nurse helpline, and I explained what Danny looked like and what he sounded like and what my fears were. I laid it all on the line for this nurse. And I still remember what she said to me. She said, oh, Susan, babies, you know, you think Danny should breathe like Colin does, and Colin's a typical kid. Danny has Down syndrome. They breathe differently. Everything you're saying sounds like he's just coming down with a cold. There's no reason to take him anywhere tonight. Just bring him into the office on Monday, and we'll take a look at him. And I hung up the phone feeling incredibly defeated, right? He's my baby. I've been with him every second since conception, right? I know when something's wrong, okay? And so I told my husband, I was like, I'm just going to stay in his room tonight and watch him. And so I sat in his room all night. I literally pulled up a chair next to his crib and sat there all night watching him sleep. And throughout the night, his breathing would get really shallow, and I'd put my hand on his chest, and when I would do that, he would go, ah! And he would start breathing normally again. And so by 5 o'clock, I was a wreck. At 5 o'clock, I went in, I woke up my husband. I was like, listen, call your dad, have him come get Colin. We've got to get Danny to the hospital. I cannot wait till Monday. I'm telling you, there's something wrong. And so my father-in-law showed up, and we handed him the baby, and I ran into the bedroom and threw on a pair of ripped jeans and a hoodie, and I came around the corner to grab Danny to put him in his pumpkin seat, and Danny was blue. My father-in-law was sitting in a dimly lit room. It was 5:30 in the morning, right? And he was holding his grandson, and he thought he'd fallen asleep in his arms, but he wasn't sleeping. He'd completely stopped breathing. And I'll tell you guys, when you learn CPR, they don't ever tell you what it's going to be like when you have to use it on somebody that you love more than life itself. And they don't ever tell you what it's going to be like when, as you're administering CPR to one son, you have another one standing there asking you questions like, why are you putting your mouth on his? Why is he blue? Is my baby brother dead? It was the hardest day of my entire life. And my father-in-law took Colin away, And the paramedic shows up at our house, and we're in the ambulance driving to the hospital. And the paramedic said to me, "You look surprisingly calm. Are you okay?" And I laughed. I was like, "No, I'm not okay. I just can't freak out yet, right? I have to know that he's safe first." And so we get to the hospital, and Danny's in a room. He's in a crib. He has oxygen in for support. He actually looks the best he's looked the entire weekend long. Like his coloring is back. He looks great in this moment. And the nurse walks in to check on us. And I chose that exact moment to have an epic breakdown. I was hysterical. I was screaming and crying and shaking and sobbing. I could not be consoled, right? And she looked at me behaving that way. And she looked at Danny in his crib looking perfect in that moment. And she said, "He's fine," because she judged me. Because she didn't know that I had him in my arms lifeless an hour ago. She didn't know that we weren't even supposed to have him and that he was our bonus baby and how desperately we wanted to keep him in our lives. She didn't know that I was still trying to recover from a C-section and I had been running around for the last 6 weeks. She didn't know I didn't have any sleep in 24 hours. She didn't know we were still trying to navigate the special needs community so we could be the best parents we could be to him. She didn't know any of that. She judged me based on what she saw at that one moment in time. And the reason I share that story with you is that happened 10 years ago, and I still feel it like it was yesterday. What kind of stories are people telling about you? Because they're telling stories. Don't think for a second that they're not. And you don't want that to be your story. You want your story to be, "He held my hand when I was scared. She called my friend so I didn't have to be alone. They brought me a warm cup of coffee on the coldest day of my life." Those are the stories you want to have told about you. And here's the thing. You get to decide what kind of stories they're going to tell. Are you going to lead with empathy? Or are you going to lead with judgment? Make the right choice.
Thank you, Susan, for sharing that incredibly poignant story with us. And that leads us to the third A of service recovery, the apology, which I personally think is apropos here because I have to follow that tough act. So Susan, you owe me an apology here.
I'm sorry,
I'm just kidding.
every time, I'm like, I feel so bad that she has to follow that.
I know, it's abuse, I think. No, just kidding. All right, guys, so the third A of in service recovery is the apology. And an apology is not an admission of guilt or wrongdoing, and there's always room for a sincere apology. So you can build that bridge of connection and pave the way for the amendment by offering a sincere apology, simply by saying, "I'm sorry, that's not the experience that we want you to have." And when you're issuing the apology, remember, we're all on the same team. So don't throw other departments under the bus. Passing the blame diminishes the sincerity of the apology. And remember, we're talking about part 2 or number 2 of service recovery, and that's to follow through and resolve the issue. So if we're constantly faced with overflowing trash cans and we've not done anything to resolve it, we share in that responsibility. And lastly, when you're thinking about the apology, don't overshare. Our burdens should not be the patient's burdens. When we were traveling around, we met with a CFO of one of our clients, and she shared with us this story. She had a friend who came to her facility for an outpatient diagnostic test. And the friend was sitting in the waiting area. They were extremely busy. She could see people, you know, all over the waiting area and associates hustling to get patients to their appointments and back and forth. And she knew they were busy. And so she sat there and was fine. And her appointment time came and went, and she sat there patiently until somebody came up to her a little while past her appointment time and said, "Oh my goodness, you're still here? I'm so sorry. We completely forgot about you." Now, who says that, guys? When we approached that patient and said those words to her, we changed her perception from that of grace to anger. And she shared that experience with her friend who was the CFO of the facility. So choose your words wisely. We could have easily said, I apologize for your wait. Let's get you back to your appointment right away.
Thanks, Gwen. And the final A in service recovery is amend. And this is where you do the work, right? This is where you solve their problem, you put out the fire so it doesn't keep burning all the way through to the end. This is you following your organization on social media, bragging about the work that they do in the community. This is you leading initiatives, right? This is you being empowered to be the difference as we're going through. Patients share information all the time. Take that information and drive change. Plan interventions, right, as you're going through, and improve your work environments and our patients' experience. Now, I always like to end all of my presentations on this quote because I really love it and I really believe it. You know, people are going to forget what you said, and they might forget what you did, but they're never, ever going to forget how you made them feel. And I promise you, if you made them feel cared about and cared for, you made them feel loved and you made them feel safe, they're going to remember that for the rest of their lives. But if you made them feel like they were a distraction or a disruption to your day, or like they weren't good enough based on what they look like or how they talked to you or why they were being seen, they're going to remember that too. And the problem with them remembering that is social media allows them to get that message out so incredibly quick. And organizations crumble from a bad reputation. And it's your reputation on the line too, because you are the one they're telling those stories about. Any questions for us? That's everything we have for you today. Thank you all so much for your participation today. You guys were great. Welcome to the Ensemble family. Don't forget that Gwen and I are resources for you. If you ever have any great stories or any terrible stories, be sure to share them with us. We'll use them in future training sessions. And, you know, welcome. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Susan and Gwen. Really neat to get to hear both of you together. That was my first time getting to attend, so that was pretty neat. Thank you so much.
Oh, awesome. Well, you guys have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
You
Christine.
as well.
Bye-bye.